Growing up, one of my favourite films was Toy Story. I loved the idea that my toys, when I left the room, had lives of their own that they lived. In the very first film, Buzz Lightyear is a new toy that enters Andy's Toy Box community as an outsider, and Buzz believes that he's a real space ranger, that he's not a toy, and believes that he can fly. And throughout the film, Buzz is on a journey of discovering who he really is, while the rest of the toys in the toy box have their own journey of learning how to welcome difference into their community. What's all that got to do with the Book of Ruth? Well, keep watching and you can find out. Hi, I'm Reverend Dan, Methodist minister in Bognor Regis, Feltham and Westergate, and this week we're looking at Ruth chapter 4. In Ruth 3, we found Ruth visiting Boaz at night, hoping he would give her home. Long-term security, safety and survival for her and Naomi. Naomi and Ruth, of course, have lost much. Their husbands, their security, their safety. They were grieving. They were struggling for hope. And the nature of the culture of their day meant that they were vulnerable to the nth degree. But Boaz was not the immediate next of kin. There was someone else who was closer, a closer kinsman. And so in keeping with the culture of the day, this person has first rights to act as next of kin for them. And so at the start of Ruth chapter 4, we find Boaz taking action. He takes centre stage and speaks to the closer next of kin, who does have first rights to act. And now, Boaz perhaps pulls a bit of a sly one here. I think as readers of the story, we're encouraged to see Boaz in a positive light, but there's a possibility that Boaz may have been being a bit manipulative here, possibly even self-seeking. Maybe he did really like Ruth. Maybe he really did want to marry Ruth, to make her his wife, and twisted things in his favour. Or maybe he saw an opportunity to obtain some land and so did what he had to do to get it. So Boaz meets up with this closer next of kin at the city gates in public with 10 of the city elders around them. And he says to the man, "Hey, you know Naomi, she's back, and she's selling this land that belonged to our kinsman, Elimelech. So I thought I'd tell you about it here and now in front of all these witnesses and say to you, if you redeem it, do it. But if not, tell me, and I will redeem it." This unexpected discovery comes that Naomi has land. It's a bit of a surprise. It was Elimelech's and perhaps was left during the famine and has never been returned to. The fact she's selling the land probably is a sign that Naomi was at a loss of all other hope. And so selling the land is the only way she can move forward. You would think the land would offer long-term fruitfulness, but actually for her short-term survival, it's her only option. And so the man says to Boaz, "Yes, I will redeem it." And then Boaz goes on. And he claims that by taking the land, this man must also take Ruth, the Moabite, and therefore maintain the dead man's name. This would have meant that any children that Ruth and this other man had would be named after Ruth's dead husband, and that they would in the end inherit the land. And at that, the man says, no, I can't redeem it. It will damage my own inheritance. You redeem it. Does Ruth's foreigner status get used by Boaz here to his advantage? Or does he use it to overcome the fact that there was a prohibition against marrying a foreigner? But because he could become the next of kin, he could legally marry Ruth despite that. They have a son. They name him Obed, who Naomi then cares for. And in some ways, Obed becomes a son to Naomi, to Ruth and to Boaz. Obed becomes a symbol of the restoration of hope because there can now be descendants. No longer is Ruth an outsider because she's found hope. She's found home, and not just with Boaz, but with the whole community. Ruth and Boaz marry, and all the people and the elders at the marriage come and they bless Ruth and they say, "May she build up the house of Israel." Ruth is now seen as a member of the Israelite community. And that is where Buzz and Toy Story come back in. In life, we often encounter people who are strangers to us, people who are different from ourselves. As churches, as Christian community, I believe God calls us to be community that reaches out in love to all. to welcome in the name of Christ those we perceive to be or not to be like us. Cowboys or space rangers, potato heads or slinky dogs, Barbie dolls or dinosaurs. To help each other to discover who we are, made in the image of God, and to work out if we really are real or just a toy, if we can fly or fall in style. And if none of that makes sense to you, watch Toy Story and it will. God calls us to make space for all people to find hope through faith in the God who is a God for all. To discover that the community of faith is the place in which all people, yes, all people, no matter background or belief or culture or race or gender or sexuality or ethnicity or self-confidence, can find home, can belong. Church, I speak to you. God is challenging us. God's challenge to us, regardless of lockdown, regardless of what gathered community will look like in the coming weeks or months, is to make sure that we hear this call and respond. That this call is the reality that is found among us. That we are a community of hope. That we are a community that points to the home that can be found when we and all discover they belong to God. A community that reaches out in love for all. Friends, God works through the unexpected. Friends, God works through the stranger. Friends, we are never without hope, because in God we can find home.